Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Hidden Wisdom. I'm so grateful to be joined today by Nelson Whiting. Nelson is a best-selling author, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and certified clinical hypnotherapy instructor, having completed over 3,000 sessions, helping clients overcome bad habits such as smoking, overeating, gambling, and so-called treatment-resistance, depressive, and anxious feelings. He has a 95% recovery rate in 1 to 3 sessions and more Google verified 5-star reviews than anyone around. Nelson also specializes in helping LDS men overcome compulsive porn habits in as little as 1 session without support groups, accountability partners, site blockers, or distraction tools. Nelson has been featured as a speaker at the annual Utah Energy Healing Conference, the Sunstone Symposium, the Rad Dads podcast, and more. He is the owner and operator of No Limits Hypnotherapy and co-founder of the ascensionacademy.org. Nelson, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, this is fun because I interview a lot of people that I haven't actually met in person, but Nelson and I have actually met, which is awesome. So I'm grateful to be reconnecting with you today for this conversation. Um, so today we're going to talk a little bit about hypnotherapy as a modality for healing, which we talk about regularly on the show as deep repentance, right? Some of like really getting down to the root of um, some of the things that might be coming out as behavioral type issues on the surface. And hypnotherapy is obviously an incredible modality for that. But before we go there, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how it is that God brought you to hypnotherapy first for yourself and then it became a career for you?
Okay, so the story is basically I came back off my mission and got into playing a lot of tennis, played that in college, and was trying to figure out what to do with my life. Didn't really have a whole ton of direction other than wanting to play tennis and then getting too injured in that to play competitively and do my pro dreams. But I did end up doing real estate with my dad for a long time. But I got into the seminary teaching program. I was hired by the church to do seminary teaching. Ended up teaching junior high seminary to a bunch of squirrely kids, and that was fun. And I thought that was like my dream come true, and that was all I ever wanted was to just teach seminary. Loved the whole thing, but for some reason I kept getting sick, um, and I had to hire all these subs out, and, until it was like, weeks at a time of me getting sick, and I had some weird mono thing that kept coming up, and anyway, the church was like, "Hey, we want you to come back. We want you to teach another year this next year." But um, that and a whole bunch of other things that happened ended up pulling me on. I was feeling like, man, my whole dream and desire in life was just crushed. Like the Lord finally put me into it just to pull me right back out of it. And I was like, okay, I'll go back to the whole real estate thing. So I did that for another many years. Um, but it just wasn't fulfilling to me. You make decent money if you're a decent salesperson and you can connect with people and you know how the financial world works. But it just wasn't fulfilling to me. And so in um, you know the winter of 2018, 2017, I was really just like, what should I be doing with my life? Um, and I just kept thinking, man, I'm entrepreneurial. I can figure out how to build a business in whatever I want. I'm a very solopreneur type guy, although we have a big team in clinic now. But I felt like I just wanted to find something where I could help people very most in a very fulfilling way that was the fastest. And I have kind of a high BS detector in the sense of like, I don't want to do something that just doesn't work. I want to know that it works. And I'm not big on like traditional Western modalities of doing things. Because just in my life they haven't tended to be real solutions. There's a lot of band-aid solutions, and so as I was doing my research, I was trying to think, well, what could I go into? Hypnotherapy just kept coming to the top, coming to the top, coming to the top, and I had a connection to that idea already to begin with, because back in high school at our senior all-nighter party in Springville, I had been hypnotized and had a crazy experience, and it was the first time I had anything like that happened to me. It was weird. I mean, the guy's he's counting down, he's taking me onto this cloud of relaxation. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? This is amazingly relaxed and euphoric. And I fell out of my chair and I slammed my head on the hardwood floor of the stage, and just like echoed, and everyone heard. And I didn't feel a thing. I had I didn't realize it, but I had dropped into what's called the Esdale state of trance. Some people call it the hypnotic coma. I don't like that because you're still very aware and you can control things. But in the Esdale state, it was named after James Esdale, who was doing a bunch of surgeries back in India without chemical anesthesia, because he could put people in this state and they would develop full body analgesia or anesthesia depending on how deep they went. So when I fell out of my chair and I hit my head, I didn't feel any of that pain, and I was like, oh, that's super weird. And that was really my only kind of experience with that. But I was very intrigued with the power of the mind. And so over the years, I was doing sports psychology for tennis. Now I was doing affirmations for myself. And I built kind of these different systems of how to develop my mind, and reading these different books on how to have better memory and doubling my brain power. And all the while seeing like, oh man, this is just connecting me to the spirit. This is connecting me to God. This is making me feel more whole. And if I'm whole, then, I don't want. Like if I'm content and I'm satisfied, I'm not chasing all these other things, and I feel like I can just be in control of, deciding what I want to do with my life. So that all kind of came together, and I was like, hey, I want to jump into hypnotherapy. I researched all these different schools, and when you say, what God led you into, at the time maybe it didn't feel like God was leading me into it until I finally decided. But there's all these big schools I was thinking of going to for clinical hypnotherapy. None of them ended up working because my wife was pregnant and I couldn't travel the way I wanted to. So I found one up in far west Utah by a guy named Dennis Parker, who was he'd been doing it for about 35 years. And I didn't know if I'd like his approach, but as soon as I started learning from him, he was bringing in scriptures left and right. He was an LDS guy. And the fact that he'd been doing it for so long, and he had spent so much time trying to understand how this went together scripturally, and we had the same LDS background, I was really drawn to how he was doing it. So him bringing in the most up-to-date hypnotherapeutic clinical protocols together with a gospel foundation, to me was like, oh, this is the magic sauce, right? Because he was teaching us stuff that he called adversarial protocols, how to work with false spirits, adversarial influences, because, I could give you several examples. A lady that just left this morning that was dealing with a spirit of fear, and not realizing that it wasn't her, because it felt like, oh yeah, this is just me. It's just my personality. I get so worked up about these certain things. And of course, it's just me. I've always just been this kind of hyper-vigilant person. And I feel like it keeps me safe. It keeps me careful, right? It's like, well, could you be careful and safe and hyper-vigilant without the fear? If you leaned into your own wisdom and that spirit of God inside you, whose job it is to help you do all that anyway, and so when people finally realize, oh, this isn't me, and they can dissociate from it, and then they can call it out for what it is. I watched your podcast with he's here in Mapleton, the one that you did with false spirits, Doxy, right? I really like that one, because you start recognizing how these spirits are working, and you guys had them all classified down to the different categories, but we don't necessarily need to classify them like that. But the idea is that if you want to heal, you have to have the truth. The truth will make you free. And the more knowledge you have over false spirits, the more power you have over them. And so how do you gain the knowledge? You have to find out something that you don't know. Well, how do you find out something that you don't know? And if you're unaware of it, but you're being dictated and controlled by something inside you, it's making you do things, but you're unaware of it, then by definition it's subconscious. It's underneath the awareness. So you have to regain control over it, but you can't control it until you're aware of it. And if you know enough, you can make better decisions, and those informed decisions can lead to healing, because I think that's all faith is just decision making. When you have information, you make a decision. It doesn't matter what decision you make. It was a faithful pursuit, because everyone wants to do what they think is right and good for them, right? As soon as you make that decision, faith is a principle of action, but the action itself is just the decision-making process in the brain that now will bring the subconscious mind online, and all of your energy and power can move in that direction. If you made a bad mistake, fine. You get to figure that out sooner than later because you decided to move forward, right? But when it comes to those adversarial protocols, Dennis taught us that stuff, and he had actually become good friends with Lee Gibbons up at the church office building. He was the former director of LDS.org, and they were so happy with his protocols that they supposedly had endorsed him and his methods and his protocols. And I get in trouble for saying that because then people think that I'm the one that's endorsed. So I make a point. I was not the one that was endorsed. He was, or supposedly was, but the priesthood executive committee up there at the church office building was super excited about what they were doing. Supposedly several members of the Quorum of the 12 had watched these videos of Dennis working with missionaries who were struggling with pornography and saying, oh, this hypnosis stuff, it's not devil worship like we thought it was. Because 25 years ago, that was the big thing. It was like they were still stuck in the 1700s, 1800s paradigm of what hypnosis is. Seances and exorcisms and well, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that can happen when people go into an altered state of consciousness, right? And so even in the church handbook, they say, don't do hypnosis unless you consult with a medical provider, and don't do it for entertainment purposes. And it's really just not, it's just built on a misunderstanding of what hypnosis is. So went to school, learned about all of how it all really works. And that was definitely the beginning of a beautiful journey for me, because now after 6 years, I feel like I've definitely found my calling. This is something I can wake up happy to do every day, and praying for all my clients and feeling like we're making progress. They all make progress, unless they're on some weird medication or they have a crazy mental illness that, we're not licensed to deal with. But yeah, it was an incredible journey for me as far as being able to realize very, very quickly, even though I wasn't very good at it, I was certified, that you can make massive progress with people if they'll just find that belief system. The truth will make them free. If they can get their subconscious online, conscious mind, subconscious mind are on the same page. There's no longer that double-mindedness that James talks about. You got a single-mindedness, and it's based on the truth. You can make better decisions that way. So how's that for a short answer?
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much. That's fantastic background. And I don't know, I just always love to see how God works with us, right? Like God knows you so well. God knows all of us so well that when we allow life to just flow and be decisive when things come up, if we're willing to seek that knowledge and then act on it, God can guide us to where we're supposed to be, to things that you probably never thought about when you were a kid. Oh yeah, I want to be a hypnotherapist, but like God knows where you're meant to be. So I love that. So I wanted to ask too, like, how did this story line up with, like your experience and your research and everything with your book, right? Because you wrote this book, Your Problem Isn't Pornography. Was that something like, and you don't have to share too much if you don't want to, but like, was that something that kind of emerged once you were learning the technique, is like, oh, this is working specifically for men who have addiction to pornography? Or like, how did that come into play?
Well, my trainer, Dennis, he had actually been helping a lot of guys with pornography. That's how he got in with the church, because the local stake president, I won't say names because I've gotten in trouble for saying names before, but the local stake president, who you can find on YouTube being interviewed by Dennis, he had been really happy with Dennis's work in helping their family with all kinds of issues, and he started referring. He referred over like 400 people over several to Dennis, and so he had kind of figured out. His big claim to fame was how the imagination works, and he had a very specific exercise that, if you want, I could give it to you in a link that you could share here to listeners, because I've made a training out of it in how to redirect the subconscious mind when it gets stuck in certain emotions. And the idea is that the imagination is where all of it starts. When somebody gets exposed to pornography, they're going to have something in their imagination blowing this up into all these what-if case scenarios. And then the subconscious mind goes after a memory to justify, validate, and defend that future case scenario, right? So if the guy sees the hot jogger running down the street and he's like, oh, there's the hot jogger. And if he allows himself to stay giving attention and energy to that, then of course it's going to expand inside the subconscious mind. Supposedly it expands up to 2,500 times instantaneously, the amount of energy and information that the brain is trying to find to wrap that into an experience inside the brain. And then it goes after a memory to justify, validate, and defend that and say, oh, well, I could go look at porn, or I could think more about this. And the memory is like, yeah, you could. You survived. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. And then, of course, the degree to which you amplify the imagination and justify it with enough memory is going to determine the strength of the emotion that you end up feeling in the body. So now these people are feeling lust, and of course, if you're focused on that, you can continue to give energy to that, then you tend to act the way you feel, and then they have to, you know, go home and take care of it somehow, and in acting out, slipping up, and it violates their moral standards. So then they move into guilt and shame, and beating themselves up moves them into self-criticism, and self-criticism always depletes the energy stores in the body to where you can't overcome the problem. You have to move back into self-love to even have the energy to overcome the problem. And that's really what the hypnotherapy or any form of therapy needs to do, is restore those internal energy stores that are based in truth and power, right? So the pornography thing with him, I was really happy that I had struggled with pornography. I think that it's safe to say, based on all of my research, that most people on this planet, most people will struggle with lust, because it's just one of those sins. It's one of the big sins. You're going to struggle with lust, and the degree to which you struggle with it, I mean, that, and we have guys that come in here and they're just having like deviant thoughts and they don't like it. Some are just objectifying people too much. I had a guy who was an administrator at a school, 50-year-old guy, and he just felt like he was objectifying these high school girls, right? Didn't like that, came in, you know, and that's kind of the upper range of feeling like this is violating their moral standards, all the way down to the images and getting into the rough stuff and the violent, all the way down to, you know, death is where the adversary is always trying to take you. And I liked how Doxy explained that as well in the podcast. But that's what we find is the pattern is the devil's always looking for death. Either you watching this kind of stuff to where it just kills you spiritually, or you commit suicide, because a lot of people do that. They have so much shame and guilt. Teenagers, quite a few teenagers that are doing that. But the problem is prevalent enough. Supposedly by age 11, it's like 96% of the population has been exposed to pornography. And depending on what surveys you're looking at, even the churches, supposedly, Dennis, who had trained me, said that the surveys that he found with the church were that 85% of singles between ages 18 and 35 struggle with pornography. And,
no, that's lower than I would have thought, actually.
Well, and when I told that one bishop, he said, yeah, I think the other 15% are lying. And I had four bishops that I talked to, who told me that 100% of their ward was struggling with pornography. And that it wasn't necessarily that they were coming in to confess a pornography problem, but if they wanted to come in and go to the temple or get married or something, that always came up. And then he realized, oh yeah, they're struggling with this. So it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to take care of it, but why is it such a big problem, right, is the big question. Because here, especially in Utah, we have such a sensitivity to that. And in the church, you're raised, 12 years old, you start all these worthiness interviews. And so your awareness of it goes up. Your accountability for it goes up. But the awareness and the accountability that's just off the charts more than probably any other population on the entire planet has not necessarily solved the problem, right? In the sense that, we do so much comparative work to make sure that we're giving people the very best thing, but people who are, resorting to flip phones and the site blockers, or, just confession, thinking that that's gonna, I gotta get it off my chest, somehow that's gonna fix it. Or they start going to the support groups and, statistically, they're not measuring results in most cases, but when they do measure results, the only things that we've been able to find is it's about 200 sessions before somebody feels they have a handle on it. About 70% feel like they have a handle on it, but the relapse period is only about 30 days. So even after 200 sessions, which is about 5 years of attending with a very high attendance rate with your cohort, you still have a very low chance of being able to keep the problem gone permanently. As much as I don't like to beat up on those modalities, because it is what people think they should be going to, and they can help, we call them low leverage solutions because they're just so stinking slow. Very much like talk therapy in that sense. I could talk a lot about this depending on what direction you want to go with it. But the point is that because most people struggle with this, I think that struggling with lust is as common as struggling with, you know, food disorders or pride, right? I mean, it's just something that you're going to struggle with. But if it is, why aren't there better solutions? Why haven't we figured it out? Well, it's not just with pornography, because people haven't found out very good solutions to fix smoking or overeating or depression or anxiety either. But if we apply the same modality that we're using for guys struggling with pornography across those other issues, we fix them all just as fast in 1 to 3 sessions. Why does that work? I can get into that. There's neuroscience, there's quantum theory, there's the spiritual dimension of how this is working scripturally. But it just works really, really fast. It just blows my mind every session that I do. I mean, I've done thousands of sessions, but still it's just like, this is so cool.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about something similar today because I was listening to something and I was thinking about talk therapy, right? And like I encourage everyone to go to talk therapy. I think everyone should have a therapist, right? But depending on what your problem is, talking about it might not be enough, right? And I think that there's kind of a misunderstanding where we're so we're so fixated on the external of like what I'm sensing with my 5 senses in the physical realm, that we're very disconnected from the fact that our behavior is not the problem, exactly like you wrote in your book, right? That the behavior is an outgrowth of the real problem. And usually the real problem it can be traced to your thoughts, to your emotions, and finally into your belief system that is held in the subconscious, like you were talking about. So you've got to go that deep if you really want to see changes in your behavior. And I think that we're not really educated on that. And again, everything's so externalized from us that the idea of doing inner work, I talk about this all the time on this channel because we talk about masculine and feminine energy. And the masculine is the external, and it's so held up and idolized, and our whole world is like built around that, which is not wrong, but it's totally imbalanced. And so it's very unhealthy. And this process of going in and doing the inner work to discover, what am I believing about myself or God or reality that's not true? That's the inner work. That's feminine. That's hard. Like you're going down into the depths, right? But as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I think that is the true invitation of repentance, which is another thing that I think maybe we haven't quite defined very well. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, definitely. So repentance is such a good topic. So let me start it by giving an interesting story. There's a book called Ecological Dynamics by a guy named Rob Gray. He's a professor down in Arizona. He helps people with skills acquisition, how to acquire skills very, very quickly, which is what we're trying to do down here, right? But he tells this story. I use it in my coaching for tennis with my boys, and in one sense, there's an aspect of this where to develop a new habit, it might take 300 or 400 repetitions, but if you do it in play, it might take 10 or 20. Okay, so like changing the paradigm, how are you developing new skills? Well, in life, if you're doing something but it's not in play, like you're very serious, you're very perfectionist, you're very like, I gotta do this, and there's like a scrupulosity complex almost, right? Then this is very fun, for one. And the other is how much am I affording myself the opportunity to mess up? Because you're not going to learn anything until you get it wrong first. Just across the board, you're not. You're just not. That concept alone is crazy. So there was a study that Rob Gray cited in his book. He took, they were doing studies with a baseball team and how to increase their batting averages. And they took 3 groups of these guys and said, hey, we're going to do this group over here. You can only, for 6 weeks, you can only hit the ball straight into the ground or straight up in the air or extreme right or extreme left, but you can't hit it a home run down center field. For 6 weeks, you have to practice hitting it wrong, right? And then the second group was just the control group, regular baseball practice. The third group had to hit it right every single time, center field home run, for 6 straight weeks. After 6 weeks, which group do you think had made the most progress when they came back?
I'm going to guess the first.
Why would you guess that?
Because you already told me. Because you said you have to mess up before you can get it right. And That is so profound. We never hear that, but I think you're absolutely correct with that.
Why do you think, though, that they were able to, they improved their batting average double than anyone else? Why do you think that is?
Tell me.
I mean, they were flabbergasted too. They were trying to figure out why the heck is this the case. In one sense, they were calibrating better in what it feels like to do it wrong, and so they could. I mean, in their sensitivity of saying, "Well, I'm going to hit it straight up in the air," that feels different than hitting it straight down or to the right or to the left. They calibrate more, right? But in the other sense, they were afforded the freedom to get it wrong, and so they learned faster. So when you think of repentance in that metanoia sense in the Greek, that it's just learning, it's growing. You think of John the Baptist standing out there on the River Jordan banks and saying, "Change your mind, open your mind." That's what he's saying when he's saying repent, right? Change your mind. That's all he's saying. But in order to change your mind, you have to have information. In order to make change, the repentance process requires information. That's why just confessing is not going to fix it. Or going to a 12-step group and everyone's playing kind of like this pity party. Let's all talk about our problem. We're not going to talk through our problem, though, and there's no facilitator there to actually help people find truths about what's happening inside themselves. Then it's very, very slow. It works, but only insofar as somebody actually changes the belief system. And that's why talk therapy tends to be so slow, because in analyzing it, when you and I are talking on a conscious level, we're talking about the things that we know, right? We're analyzing things that we know, the thoughts that we're aware of. And depending on how stressed out you are, the studies show, in fact, Dr. Dispenza has a lot of this research in his internal research that they've done, is that if you try to analyze your life from inside a negative emotion, 100% of the time you will make it worse. 100% of the time they're measuring these people's brainwave states and they're like, oh, they just made it worse by thinking about the problem. Like if you have a problem and you're just thinking about it all the time, you're ruminating on it, you're worrying about it, you're hoping that by thinking a lot about it, somehow this thought will just come to you. No, you make it worse every single time. Which means that the only way to solve the problem would have to be to move out of analysis mode, out of the disturbing emotion, so that then you can think clearly about the problem. And that's why prayer is so stinking powerful. Because we say, yeah, hypnotherapy is great, but Christ is the best therapist. I do believe that. And he's already offered us a way that I talk about at length in the book, how to leverage prayer for real repentance, how to really truly pray. Because when you get away from thinking, oh, it's Heavenly Father, thank you for this thing in the past, bless me with this thing in the future, and goodbye. And there's no listening, there's no staying there. What chance are you giving the Lord to change you or instruct you or inform you? And if that instruction isn't really coming while you're in that state of prayer, where you're disconnected from the external world, you're not looking for a solution out there in the external world. It's not, oh, my phone doesn't have sight blockers on. That's an external solution, right? Or, oh, that computer, like I just can't go to that website anymore. No, that's an external solution for you to say, well, I just got to go sing a hymn, or I got to shut the computer and leave. I got to go do some push-ups. I got to go for a walk. I got to throw cold water in my face. These are trying to change behavior to change thoughts, which is the hardest way to change thoughts. Fastest way is to somehow get inside, internal. The closer you go towards your core, the closer you get to God. You go inward, you go upward, and especially if you know that's your intention, with all forms of meditation and prayer, it's not just be still. That's what most people do when they're trying to meditate. That's why it's so hard for most people. It's not be still, it's be still and know that I am God. Now you have an intention behind it. You have a direction, you have an aim, you have a connection that you're striving to make. And supposedly, if you can get in that state, which we've proven all the time, if you get into that alpha theta brainwave state, that's a natural state of healing where your body is going to naturally want to come into line with your belief system when your objective is to heal and connect with something greater than you. And in your mind is much greater than you, no matter who you think you are. Your mind that is quantumly entangled, whatever you want to call it, to God is so much greater than you. So if you get in touch with that, that alone can bring healing. But if we do it looking for the solution, And then finding that when you've, neuroscientifically, what's going on inside the brain is you have that conscious mind, that neocortex, frontal lobe, and you have subconscious mind, the limbic system. Well, part of the limbic system is the amygdala. That's your survival center. And that's why people say, oh, the subconscious mind, it just cares about your survival. It's not that it cares about your survival, because it'll only care about your survival to the degree that you've conditioned it to do that, and the way you've conditioned it to do that, right? Because like the lady that came in this morning, and her survival was, I'm scared anytime I'm in the car driving with somebody else. Well, I don't have a survival mechanism that does that. My amygdala doesn't do that for me. And people who get into very even neutral situations that have panic attacks, their amygdala is going like crazy, right? So it's because they've programmed themselves. It's not because the subconscious is somehow like caring what's right or wrong or true or false or good or bad. It doesn't. It's just doing what you've told it to do. And so if that's the case, and you're in survival mode, and that's what's driving you to these addictions or bad behaviors or depressions or anxiety, how do you turn that off? How do you turn off the survival mode? You'd have to enter that subconscious mind, the limbic system, with a calm way. We do an induction, a hypnotic induction, get them into that state. It quietens down the amygdala, and now the whole limbic system becomes very plastic. That neuroplasticity also brings on the neocortex, so that the conscious mind and the subconscious mind are like, oh, this is what we know is our goal. And the subconscious is like, yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's turn on all of our power in that direction. And now the frontal lobe that is worried about future and what really matters and is caring about long-term future planning is saying, oh, subconscious mind, we don't want to be so focused on pleasure gratification, which was really only a survival mechanism from all these stressors in my life. Let's do something different. And next thing you know, at the speed of thought, neurons are sending out within milliseconds new connections. As soon as you've learned something new, well, now the repentance process has started, right? Process that we can see in the brain happening with those new neurons coming out and saying, oh, when I get stressed, I'm going to move into loving myself and finding something better to do. If they really believe that on a subconscious level, then that continues to get reinforced, that connection. And the other connection to that neuron that said, oh, well, when I was all alone, I had spare time, I had free time, and I might as well go look at pornography, whatever that temptation was they had acted on so much. Most people say, well, if that connection's still there, wouldn't it be just as easy for me to go back to it? Because that's a habit. And that's not how neurons work, though, because there's only so much energy to go around. So if you put more and more and more and more energy on this positive connection, then this other one loses energy, and that's called synaptic pruning. And the neuroscience understands that when you prune that synapse, you don't go back to it unless you make conscious decisions to go back to the problem again. And that's why so many people that come in, when they finally fix the problem, they can't get angry. They can't get the urge back even. It's not that we're removing their libido, but they have normal responses to sexual things or old bad habits, old triggers. And then when they're like, oh, 2 or 3 months later, they're like, oh yeah, the problem came back. But it was really weird. It was almost like there was space between me and the problem. Like I had to decide, like take many steps to get there this time. Like, yeah, it's because you had severed that. So if you have some skills and tools to keep you on track and not take those steps again, it'd be a lot easier because you create so much space between you and the temptation. And just the fact that you've learned so much, like when you learn something new and you've stretched your mind, there's no unstretching it. It's like that new thing heightens your senses and you become so keenly aware that there is no going back to the old problem. And that's, I think, what real repentance does. You learn enough, just like Joseph Smith said, in the words of Joseph Smith, love that book, that he said that Christ became what he became through knowledge. Knowledge saves a man. The principle of salvation is the principle of knowledge. And that's how he put all of his enemies under his feet. Last ones being death and hell, through gaining knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I want to be clear, because your book really hits this on the head. We're not saying knowledge as opposed to wisdom. Right? We're saying knowledge is like in general, there's learning and understanding that on the knowledge side, the masculine side, yeah, that's your head, that's rationale, that's whatever you want to call that. And on the wisdom side, that's your faith, your intuition, That's the heart, right? These go together, yin and yang. And like you said, the masculine side that has turned into most traditional talk therapies, thanks to Freud, who totally messed up the whole therapy world,
Totally.
messed it all up. You have to find the feminine side. Because all these guys that come in, they don't want to get in touch with their emotions. Well, that's partly why they still have the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Ooh, well said. Well said. That feels triggering for somebody. Remember, triggers are also an invitation, right? Triggers are a sign that, oh, there's something in me that maybe needs to go through this process and experience some healing work, right? But yeah, I'm a young fan myself, not really big on the Freud side of things. Um, but yeah, I appreciate all that you just shared there. Thank you for breaking down the neurological process that you're going through, because that was something I wanted to hit on. What are some of the other challenges that you've helped people with? Maybe even share some specific instances, whatever the spirit brings to mind for you, just to help people have a broader idea of how this process can be beneficial. One thought that I had too, that maybe, I don't know if you've had this experience, because I know that you're like, it's very much kind of a therapeutic, um, people going to you for therapeutic processes of trying to heal specific things. But I'd also be curious to hear your thoughts on what are the spiritual benefits of hypnotherapy for someone who's just wanting to expand spiritually and to grow closer to God. I just gave you like three different questions. So,
Well, think of it like this. I don't have this explanation in my book because it gets a little bit more involved and takes a little bit more time to explain to people. But now I'm not even remember the guy's name, the Nobel Prize winner who postulated that he won the Nobel Prize because he had postulated that the total number of minds in the universe is one. And if that's the case, and we're all just part of that mind, and we're like pretending like we're separate or we're quantumly entangled, maybe we are separate but quantumly entangled, right? It's all the way down to string theory. Everything we do affects everyone else. How is this affecting us on a spiritual level, or what's actually happening? This is so fascinating to me because when somebody is in, I touched a little bit on this when we first started, but I'll kind of break it down here. When somebody is living in any form of self-criticism, self-condemnation, self-rejection, self-resentment, self-hate, which is all of us at one time or another, because the universal negative self-thought is, I'm not good enough. If that's the case, then what is happening when we move into those states? Because that's definitely what we would call a separate from God type state. And it's a fearful state. Because you're afraid, well, if I'm not good enough, then what does that mean for me? And I'm afraid I can't do all these hard things in my life, right? Well, the problem with that is we know that the body is like a battery, and you have energy stores in the body. You have an electromagnetic field. We know that when you move into those states of self-criticism, you deplete energy so much that you just can't have enough energy to solve the problem. And so all the guys that come in, they say, oh, well, this isn't affecting really even my relationship with God, or it's not affecting my relationship with other people. Well, if your energy levels are so low because you're living in such a state of self-criticism, can you give love to somebody else? Can you sacrifice for somebody else? Can you give forgiveness and compassion and mercy and respect to somebody else if you're not giving it to yourself? And the answer, of course, is no. So you can only do that if you have enough and to spare, right? You have enough for yourself and it's spilling over so you can give it to other people. And this is a big paradigm shift because, at least for me, this is, across the board, because you said how is it affecting you spiritually and, what other issues this can work on. If you move someone from self-criticism, which is usually the problem, like the root, I would dare say that's like the root cause in almost every case for every mental health issue, okay? And it might take me a while to like back that up or say why, but the point is, when you're living in that state, And your depleted energy you're in a state of self-harm. For example, a kid that came in yesterday with OCD, he had scrupulosity OCD and harm OCD, and he's super like panicky about his own worthiness, and so then he wants to harm himself. And of course, if he has that, then next thing you know, he has harm OCD, but nobody connected that for him. But the reality was, if he wants to harm himself, then of course he's going to have intrusive thoughts that say harm somebody else, right? And that's what you're giving to somebody else. And so you have to be able to see yourself and the world from that standpoint of, no, I am safe, everything's okay, I can love everyone, we're like a tribe, we're all in this together. And when you have that, your defenses aren't going up all the time, and you're not going into, how they say, the world is what you see it. It's your projection of how things are. Like if I said, hey, Meghan, you're not seeing me as I am, you're seeing me as you are, right? Which is how we're doing it, projecting and mirroring out. So if somebody's living in that state, then of course they're going to be separate from other people. They're going to be separate from their own identity, and they're going to, of course, feel like they're totally separate from the spirit. So their relationship with God, they feel like, just isn't even there. And so this is also why this same modality or these kinds of belief systems can work to solve all problems. Because people who have intense depression and anxiety, so-called depression and anxiety, well, first off, how do you know you're depressed? How do you know you're not just humbled? And how do you know you're anxious? Well, maybe you're just like bored. You need to go find something to do in your life. You have too much time to think about problems, right? For one. But the other thing is, depressive feelings and anxious feelings come from anxious and depressive thoughts. They don't come from like a brain damage chemical imbalance in the brain that somehow you're going to throw Prozac at and fix, right? So if you back into what those thoughts are that are creating the feelings, somebody has a depressed feeling because they hate their life in some way, right? But if you shift perspective, and you have to gain perspective, perspective changes everything. Perspective provides discipline, understanding creates motivation. Then anytime something bad happens to you, you don't move into depression, you can move into being humbled, which are just two words that might describe the same kind of sensation, but the result of them is a totally different direction. Same with like excitement and fear, right? You can say you're excited, or you can say you're nervous. We know that norepinephrine and adrenaline coming out of the adrenals is the same chemical output, but kind of a different mindset on where those are going to be taking me, right? But this is why it works with anxiety and depression and these bad habits, high performance stuff of all kinds, even sports performance, sales performance, and chronic illnesses, because it's pretty well proven, depending on what research you look at, that almost all disease can be linked back to emotional distress. Dr. Hammer out of Germany did 50,000 brain scans showing that on looking for cancer in the why is cancer existing in the body, trying to find a link between the brain and the body. 50,000 brain scans, and 100% of them showed that the cancers were created from emotional distress. You can say, oh no, it's genetic, but what's turning on the gene in the first place? Because anyone can have a cancer gene, you can turn it on. Why is it turning on? We know genes only turn on because of a negative response to the environment. So that's an internal problem. And then, oh, I have cancer, let's go find the chemo and radiation to fix it, which has like 98% mortality rate. Or you go inside and you do therapy, and that's what Dr. Hammer was finding, was 98% of those people that went through that kind of cancer treatment had spontaneous remissions. Mm-hmm. Right? So, the body biologically is only responding to the psychological conflicts. Which, if that's really true, like in my research and my understanding of how this all could work, it's almost as if every biological problem, disease, and every psychological conflict comes back to a question of conscience, a moral dilemma. Is this person choosing what they know is right and true and correct? And if they're not, if you got them back into that, would their life come back into a state of ease instead of dis-ease? Would their body come back into a state of ease instead of dis-ease? And I think that Dr. Joe Dispenza has done a great job proving that that is the case. And when I say proof, it's no longer pseudoscience. They have doctors analyzing all of their stuff with meditation to prove these people are in massive pain and chronic illnesses and cancers and MS and all kinds of things, and they're overcoming them by getting in tune with their heart, by getting the threats and the triggers gone, because life is going to be okay. Everything is not a threat to them anymore. Right? Super fascinating stuff.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, and like just drawing that thought out a little bit, the idea that I'm hearing is kind of this thought that disease is really the result of some cognitive dissonance between your physical and spiritual selves, like this disconnect that's happening. And so coming back into unity, creating that unity through techniques like hypnotherapy, which I guess meditation we've talked about as well. Hypnotherapy is kind of a guided meditation. Would you say? Is that fair to equate that? Or is that like dumbing it down? Okay.
It's definitely like a guided meditation. I think you do need to be kind of aware of the differences to contrast, because sometimes even my students, because I certify people as hypnotherapists, and they'll go and start doing sessions, and then the person will be like, oh, well, that just felt like a guided meditation. I don't get that response anymore because I don't do it like a guided meditation. But when some hypnotherapists are just telling you to go into trance and then telling you you're amazing and telling you don't have that problem anymore, it can feel like you're listening to a YouTube guided meditation. So the clinical work that we do is actually not like that. So people come out and they would never make that kind of a comparison. Just because even if they've done a lot of guided meditation, like Joe Dispenza's stuff and whatnot, I've had people who've gone through a lot of that, and then they come and do a session and they're like, oh wow, I got to the problem so much faster because it was customized. For one, Dr. Joe Dispenza is supposedly trained in hypnotherapeutic protocols, but he's not using that on everyone, just like Tony Robbins trained in all the hypnotherapy protocols. I had a client that fixed his problem, then went to a Tony Robbins event. He's like, oh, he's doing the same thing that you do. This is incredible. Like, yeah, I know, because he studied a ton of psychology and he landed on the thing that works, hypnosis and NLP, those kinds of modalities. But anyway, I'll stop rambling there.
No, you're great. Okay, well, this is awesome. You've given a lot of food for thought. What else? What else is there? Like, what else would you share with someone who's hearing this, considering it, wanting to understand how it can be beneficial for them?
Yeah. I would definitely say that you got to understand that there's like every single person that comes in. It's funny because I don't know these people outside of they come into my office and we get work done. And then I find out from their family member or some friend of theirs that, man, like they have a lot of problems and they're like a hated person, but they come in and I'm like, okay, this person, I got to give them 100% of my love, respect, and appreciation. We got to be on the same team here and we got to fix this. But if an individual is willing to be open and come in and submit themselves to a therapeutic process, like you said, I feel like everyone could benefit from having a therapist. And, in some sense, we're all in never-ending therapy. So if you can somehow speed that up, do it the fastest way you know how. I mean, there are really, really fast ways if you know the direction you're trying to go. Breath work is great. We're going to be holding breath work retreats here, at some point in the future, doing retreats. But breath work is great. Meditation is great. Prayer is great. Hypnotherapy is good because it can be so customized to the individual. And the problem is that all these people who are like, oh, I prayed and 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 I memorized all these scriptures and all I do is read scriptures and listen to general conference talks and all that. The problem is that there's still some sort of a belief system that they have that's blocking them from whatever the solution is, whatever the healing is. And so it's not that we're like doing it some other way. We're using the mind that God has given us to dig in, leveraging as much as possible a gospel foundation, although we work with people who don't have even a Christian background at all, or even any religion at all. We're still able to do it because we don't We don't act like counselors, advisors, coaches. We just get someone in that state and then ask all the right questions for the subconscious to come up with the answer, and then test them like crazy to make sure that that subconscious program is solid and it can be reinforced. But what I would tell people is that you can fix your problems very, very, very quickly if you decide to do something about it. But if you think that the behavior is the problem or something out there is going to solve the problem, then you'll fix it a lot slower, a lot slower. People that come in for weight loss, for example, and they're like, oh, well, McDonald's, I drove past McDonald's. That was the problem. Or no, the problem is because all this junk food is in my pantry. Or the problem is the weight scale. It makes me feel bad when I get on it, right? It's like, those are not the problem. The problem is intrinsic to you. And if you really sincerely believe that on some level you're creating all of your own problems, then all of the suffering becomes, you can say, oh, that's somehow depressing, or you can say, oh, well, that just means I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong. And then the journey can begin. What am I doing wrong? So all these people with cancer, I mean, the last thing that you want to tell them is, this is all your fault, right? I won't get into that, but people can get really offended when you're like, oh no, this is your problem, and it's all in your head, and everyone hates that idea. But what if you could find the piece of knowledge that you were missing? You could maybe use someone's help to do it, ideally the Spirit, the Lord, in prayer, proper prayer, which is why if somebody can go read that chapter in my book about how to properly pray and repent, that's a good way to start it. But again, like meditation, sometimes that just takes a lot of practice and a lot of discipline. But again, perspective provides discipline. You'll always provide discipline. You'll always be disciplined and motivated enough if you have a proper perspective. So if that's the case, how do you change the perspective faster? You just need to learn. You need to gain knowledge. And so our whole objective is to give someone that knowledge. It can be really, really easy to fix the problem. The addiction, the so-called addiction that is compulsive, obsessive, you're only calling it an addiction because you think you can't stop it. It's this thing that you do over and over when you know you shouldn't be doing it. But if you change the perspective, you can change it at the speed of thought. Like guaranteed, if you do it right. It doesn't have to be something that is prolonged. And that's what's crazy about the subconscious mind. And even on the quantum side of this, is that subconscious mind doesn't care about how long you've had your problem. The time that you've had your problem. And it doesn't deal in magnitude either, meaning it doesn't care how big your problem is. It does not deal in time and magnitude. And it's nonlinear and it's non-local. The mind is everywhere, you can be tapped into it, but nonlinear means, it doesn't mean that it's not logical. The subconscious is not logical, but that doesn't mean that it's not irrational, or that it is irrational. I'm sorry, I'm mixing this up. What it means is that if you are here and you're depressed, but you want to get over here, our logic brain wants to say, oh, yeah, I got to take these steps and I got to do this to get over to here. But the nonlinear nature of the subconscious mind, or when you get into a prayerful meditative state, is that if you want to be here, you can, just because you decided to. You jump into a new dimension, a new existence. You don't have to come up with all these reasons and all these steps and all this time. Oh, time heals everything. Time heals nothing. Time only heals insofar as you gain new belief systems over that time period. So what if you could shorten that process and then just make the jump to the new self? That would be great.
Yeah. So grateful that that's a possibility, right? That we're built that way. We're built to see miraculous change immediately. I think that that's kind of a false belief that maybe we gain when growing up in religion, is this idea that this process of repentance, changing my mind, like that's going to take a lot of time and effort, right? Talk about this particularly with the idea of spiritual rebirth and being born again. We don't expect that can happen in a miraculous instant, but it can, and it does. And it should. Like, that is the invitation. God wants us to evolve as quickly as possible, as quickly as our soul wants to evolve. Thank you so much for all of that. Yeah, there's kind of two things that really stood out from what you were saying. First off, I agree that there does have to be, on some level, accountability, right? Of saying, okay, I am influencing my problem. I'm allowing this problem in some way. And the reason why that is so important is because the other end of the spectrum is also true, which is as you were saying, therefore I have the capacity to change my problem. It's one thing to say, okay, this problem is coming from me, but we have to take it all the way to say, therefore I have the power to change this. And just as we need to believe on some level that I'm contributing to my problem, I think the other thing that we have to believe, and this is maybe harder in some ways when we're dealing with these cycles of shame and guilt and all of this, but the other thing that we have to believe is I actually do possess all the power and knowledge in myself to change this pattern, to break through this. Um, Go ahead. Did you want to comment on that?
No, I mean that's absolutely right. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that has just blown my mind, and I hope that this doesn't offend anyone, but I'm just reporting what I've observed after doing so many sessions. Because by the end of these sessions, I'm working with so many God-fearing people, and I just love these people to death. But a lot of them are begging God to take away their problem, and then they're using God as the excuse for why they have their problem, and that's a dangerous game to play because now you don't really have a good relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And but what we find when somebody finally lets go, and in hypnotherapy, they're not so attached to all the religious beliefs. All they care about is, okay, what works for me? What is truth for me? What's going to get me out of this problem? And they're not like grasping for, where is God? Why can't he pull me out of the water here? It's just like, no, what am I believing that's wrong? At the end of the sessions, I would have expected more people to say, when I say, what was the most important thing you learned there? What was the most important lesson that you just got from this session? I can count on maybe one hand out of thousands of sessions the people that have said, oh, God just took that from me. It was amazing. I had like an incredible atonement type experience, and the Spirit just took that from me. That's like a very, very, very small amount of the people. What people usually report is what changed it, and the most important lesson that they gained was that I have the power to choose. I made that choice right there, and I am in control. And you can see why for a lot of us that grow up religious, it's almost like there's an aversion to that, because we'll know God is the one in control. Give him control. Let him take away all your problems. But there really is a very important aspect of healing where you got to take control back of your own power. And when you do, you realize, oh man, I can create whatever I want. Maybe I do have the capacity to become a god just as much as I do a devil. And maybe, like Nephi says, rejoice and look up, because you have the freedom to choose. And you decide to start exercising that freedom and not blame God for all your victories and all your problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah.
he is the source of all that, he's the one that's giving you the breath and life to be able to even have this experience, right? But it's not like he's sitting up there pulling all the strings like puppets, right? He's giving you the choice and opportunity to exercise your agency.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I did an episode on this recently because this was a realization that I came to as well, just in my journey, was, wow, I blame God a lot for circumstances in my life, right? And I've liked doing that because then I don't feel as accountable. But in the same way, I'm also giving away my power to do anything differently, right? And I think part of the spiritual maturation process is God inviting us to take our power back. God actually doesn't want us to give them, our heavenly parents, all the power. Like, they want us to be agents. They want us to be, like Jesus taught us, gods ourselves. He said, you are gods. And I think that this whole process really starts to elaborate on that for us, of like, we truly do have godlike capacity to change our mind, to change our circumstances, to change our behavior, if we can tap into our hearts, if we can tap into the subconscious, if we can learn what is true. And it's not learning out here in the external world from somebody else. It's learning from our highest self. It's learning from our own soul that is connected to God, that is one with God. What are we needing to know right now? It's so divine and incredible. And I would say that one other thought that I had, and then we can kind of wrap up, is we're talking about this relationship between subconscious and conscious mind. Again, because I always look at things in polarity speak, there's a masculine and feminine here, right? Where the conscious mind is more of our masculine. It's the thing that's talking to us all day long. And the subconscious mind, it's hidden, it's deep. You don't know what's down there. I think it's very easy to feel some fear when you even talk about this idea of like digging into the subconscious mind. It's a little bit like, oh my gosh, what am I going to find? But that version of our mind is our higher self. Like that is the version that is holding all truth, that is waiting to be informed and work together with the conscious mind to create our reality. And there's this is maybe kind of a funny analogy, but I do think sequencing a little bit matters when we're trying to solve problems of do we start with masculine or feminine? And from what I've seen, and I don't mean this as like women are better than men, that's not at all what I'm saying. Eve was the one who led out of the garden. And I think that that pattern continues here is that there's something very powerful in letting the feminine side of things inform the masculine about like what direction we're going to take. And so I just see that playing out here again, that like we can let the masculine doesn't stop to listen to the feminine. That sounds really bad, but like the conscious mind is not going to stop and listen to the subconscious mind. It just doesn't happen. Right. But when we actively choose and say, okay, subconscious mind, give us your wisdom, then the conscious mind can take that information and run with it. And like the masculine is so good at taking instruction and like doing the thing, right? I think we see that in men. Men are really good at being told what to do, right? And so anyway, maybe that was all like a really sexist rant that I just gave right there, but I didn't mean it to be.
No, that's right on track because we've given so much deference to the masculine side in society and cultural, but in our own learning experiences. All public schooling system, for example, is totally left brained. It's totally masculine oriented. So yeah, well these kids, these boys that are not in touch with their feminine side, and they should be out roaming the hills anyway. Like why are they 8 hours and they're kicking the desk and now they have ADHD and now they're on Adderall, and the girls who are all trying to be artistic and creative and get in touch with how they're learning, they can't do it, and the next thing you know, all these kids hate school. And we're down here to learn, and we just conditioned you out of that because of the way we do that in the system. But I 100% agree, even with religious and scholarly and spiritual pursuits, that it would be more beneficial and more important to let the subconscious, let the feminine side, let the wisdom get in touch with the intuitive side, the heart. That's what we've been missing. That's the part that we've been missing. If you don't get in touch with that, you're not going to solve the problem because you only have half the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. And when we do, look at how fast it happens, right? Like when you reorder that, you have the masculine trying to like beat away at the problem for years and years and years, not making a ton of effort. When you switch it and be informed by the heart first, boom, the masculine takes care of the problem. It's done. It's off the table. And like masculine energy is so fast, right? It just needs to know where the heck it's going instead of just like driving in circles for years and years and years. So anyway, it's just, I love seeing polarity plays out literally on every level that you can think of. And like when we get that order right, and yes, in this world, really learn to revalue the feminine for the power that she has, because she has been so put down all over time, right? In the same way that we look at Eve and we have a very particular narrative about Eve, instead of seeing like, oh my gosh, she was the leader. Like she led out into this world so we could have this experience and evolve. And she knew that wisdom was on the other side of it. Like when we can put these things in order and really bring them into balance and partnership with each other, including your heart and your mind, your conscious and your subconscious, then you have healing and wholeness and the world changes.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, Greg Braden just had a presentation on how they discovered that the heart is not a polarity organ, but the brain is. The brain is like zeros, very binary, true and false, good and bad, light and dark, good and evil, right? But the heart doesn't do that. It's like possibilities, right? Everything is a tendency towards, it's just like a movement. It's like relationships is all that it's trying to do, create relationships between everything. And how does this all work? But it's like there's infinite possibilities. That's a very different way of thinking. And especially when you get into that, it's like, that scariness that you talked about, going into the hidden, the unknown, that darkness that the Jungian psychology is always talking about. It's that womb of God that's creative. It's the there's nowhere else you can go in your mind and yourself and the universe and God. that's going to be creative to create a new life for you. So by definition, by going into the subconscious, you're going to be stepping into something that's unknown. And so when you step into that unknown, whether it's fearful or not, you have to get a new perspective about that unknown. That this is a new, exciting place to be, and I'm not going to try and use my past to predict what's going to happen here. Because if I do that, then now I'm not in the unknown anymore. And the unknown is actually a safe place to be, because that's where faith is. And then you start realizing that vulnerability is the place of the most power and strength that you can have. Vulnerability is safer than putting up the walls and having to know what's going to happen next by predicting your messed up past into what your future should be. Right? It's such a beautiful concept.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, when you brought up that whole idea of the womb, I was just having flashbacks to Jesus and Nicodemus and saying, no, you're not. They need to be spiritually born again and reborn of the spirit. And he said, and Nicodemus says, you mean I need to go back into my mother's womb? And on a physical, external, masculine level, that makes zero sense. But on a spiritual level, yes, we need to go back to our mother's womb. We need to go back to our heavenly mother's womb.
That's exactly what he was saying. Yeah, you need to be born again. That's not a physical experience. That's a spiritual born again of God experience, which means the womb was used again, just not physically.
Well, and the cosmic womb, right? That is more connected to our heavenly mother than our spiritual mother, right? Like, I think that that's just a beautiful way to think about how she holds space for us to go through this process of healing and wholeness and being born again and changing in an instant, right? Anyway, it's just beautiful things to think about. Well, Nelson, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. Where can people find more from you if they want to work with you, if they want to learn from you? Like, where do they go?
I have a website, No Limits Hypnotherapy.com. They can go on there. You can schedule sessions through that, or I have a YouTube channel. They can go on there. Most of our stuff is directed towards, there's the site. Most of our stuff is directed towards Christian guys struggling with pornography. But we've only picked that kind of like as a marketing tool. We tend to work just as much with women, that are struggling with overwhelm, stressors, anxiety, depression, that kind of stuff. But it's easy to get a hold of us just going through the website.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Be sure to go check out nolimitshypnotherapy.com if you are interested. I have been blessed I haven't worked with Nelson, but I've worked with someone who's been trained by you. And it was a great experience. And I have been able to compare it to other hypnotherapists. I really love your technique because it is one of self-discovery, that really you're just holding space to ask questions for people to get their own answers. And really helps to peel back the veils of unbelief and the conscious mind and all the things that get in the way of being able to tap into our heart and get the answers that already exist inside of you. So really appreciate your technique. Go check that out. And thank you so much for everyone listening. Hope you all have a great day.